Today we're going to brew a beer kit, and then we're going to throw our SCOBY inside just to see what happens. And I don't think it's going to cause us too much trouble, because what the SCOBY really needs is some sugar, and then fuel for the yeast, which is usually the tannins and caffeine in black tea. And by steeping our malted grains, we're going to get both maltose and tannins. And then just to make sure it's as healthy as can be, I'm going to throw in some tea bags to give it a little extra fuel. And we recently did a beer episode where we tried to make some mock beer recipes using kombucha. We had, I would say, limited success replicating the flavor. It was a little bit better when we added real beer into the kombucha, but it was still a little bit thin. It wasn't as full-bodied as you would like a beer to be, which would make sense because it was very low calorie and low alcohol. I think if we steep and ferment the grains, we'll get a little bit more flavor out of it, especially since we're using it in the first fermentation. And if we can ferment kombucha along with whole grains, I think that's going to open up a lot more flavor possibilities. We could use corn, for example, to make a mock whiskey recipe, or just have a potentially delightful corn-tasting fermented brew. And we could try wheat or rye or rice, a lot of possibilities. But before we get into all that, we need to see what happens here today. So I have a beer kit from Craft-A-Brew, a company I get most of my supplies through. And it comes with our beer yeast, which I don't think we'll be using, our specialty grains, where most of our flavor and color is going to come from. We have our dried malt extract, which is going to be our primary sugar for this. We have bittering hops, sanitizer, which we also don't need because SCOBY can take care of itself, and our little grain sock. And we're going to start by steeping our specialty grains, and we're going to start by heating up a gallon of water. We're going to wait for this to get to 155 degrees before we start steeping. Now that our water has reached 155 degrees, we can add our specialty grains, and we want to keep this temperature for 20 minutes to let it steep. After our 20 minutes are up, I'm going to remove our specialty grains and then bring it to a boil. Once we've reached a boil, we're going to slowly stir in our maltose. Once the malt extract is all dissolved, we're going to bring it back up to a gentle boil. It is about 205 degrees. That's exactly where we want it when we're brewing our black tea. And I don't think it's going to be necessary to brew this black tea with it. I think there should probably be enough tannins to get this through, especially if it's just for one fermentation cycle. If this was something we were going to perpetuate, I think the extra tea might be essential. But I think the most essential thing when you're making reckless booch is to make very safe, healthy booch. So I'm going to add it in just in case. This is going to be 6 bags of black tea for 15 minutes. Now that we're down to temperature, we are ready to take off our wort and add it to our jar. This is 2 cups of our black kombucha starter. And I did give this a taste. It's very sweet up front, very malty, very dark, and there is a lot of the hops bitterness coming through. Not much noticeable black tea taste, even though we added the 6 bags. With beer brewing, usually we want to get the wort down to temperature as quickly as possible, so that we don't have to worry about outside yeast coming in. In this case, though, the SCOBY culture should be strong enough that no outside influence is going to come in. Now I'm going to add water up to 1 gallon. This is a lot of particulates, but let's see if we can get a specific gravity. It's about 1.071. Now, usually with my kombucha, it's usually around 1.02 to 1.03, so quite a bit more going on in here, kind of to be expected. So going to add our pellicle, and then the last of our starter. Now, normally I let this go for about a week, but I think for this I'm just going to have to wait and see when it's ready. I want it to be just sour enough, like I usually like my kombucha, and hopefully a pH below 3.5. So I'll probably start taste testing it in about 5 days. We'll see where things are at. My hunch, though, is that this is going to take a little bit longer than normal. 10 days have passed since we started fermentation, and that's about 3 days longer than my black tea kombucha usually takes. There is a good layer of green sediment at the bottom, Seems like it's mostly yeast and hops that have fallen out of suspension, but otherwise it appears very normal. It's a little hazier than usual, it's a little darker than usual. Um, it still has a bit of maltiness to the smell, but it's also got a strange pineapple funkiness, which I can't quite explain. The pH never fell below 4.5, but I've been tasting it, and it is a little too acidic for my taste, so I think I'm going to call it. Most of the cheap pH strips that you might find are not super accurate, so I don't take too much stock in that. The pellicle, you can see, though, is still quite healthy looking. I don't think I'll be reusing any of this, though, just to be safe. Now, to avoid some of those sediment issues, I'm going to break out some of my old beer making equipment. This is an auto siphon, because I don't want to disturb the bottom layer too much and have that end up in our drink. It won't be too big of a deal to filter out, but I still don't want to. Well, it had worked 1 second before filming, but now we're going to try it this way. That was slower and messier than desired, but we did get our finished kombucha. Now we're ready to test our specific gravity, which has dropped down to 1.053. Very acidic. There is a lot of that hops flavor remaining. But yeah, just some sort of note of pineapple funk. Not bad, but I do think it's way too sour. We're definitely going to want to add some simple syrup to this. And just in case there's any confusion, this is not going to be alcoholic like beer. This is going to be exactly as alcoholic as any kombucha will be, which is about 0.5%. Both because we used our regular kombucha yeast, which don't like that high of an alcohol content, and we have our bacteria, which will consume the alcohol and produce the acids. When we made mock beers in the past, it was best without any sugar added at all. However, this is a lot more sour than that was. But we don't know how sweet we're going to want this beer kit kombucha, so we're going to do an incremental spread, which will probably mean that only one of these 6 bottles will be palatable, and 1 beer bottle out of an entire beer kit isn't great profit margins, but we'll also be increasing our chances that one of these is actually drinkable. Because I have assumptions about how much sugar this is going to need, but I'm pretty consistently wrong about that. So I'm going to start with 6 grams of simple syrup. And then I'm just going to add 4 additional grams for every bottle. So we'll be ending somewhere around 26 grams of simple syrup. And with all 6 bottles complete, there's nothing to do but to let it carbonate for 3 days at 78 to 80 degrees Fahrenheit. And I'm not sure if we're going to get very good carbonation. I think there is going to be a lot of yeast activity, and I think perhaps on this lowest sugar one, we'll see the best. I imagine it's going to get worse all the way through. But time will tell. I'll see you then. All right, blah, 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 time has passed. And now we're going to have a beer. This is our first bottle, just 6 grams of sugar, poured into an appropriately sized glass. It smells exactly like it did before with that weird pineapple funk. It smells very yeasty. There is some pretty good carbonation though. It's extremely sour, very yeasty. I think we're a ways off. I'm going to jump up a couple bottles. There is some of that hoppy bitterness on the back end. There is a tiny bit of maltiness. There are flavors in there, but I think they're just buried by how acidic this is. Yeah, with the sourness, all I'm tasting is some sort of very unfortunate pineapple drink. Let's go. Moving on ahead, we have our bottle with 14 grams of simple syrup, which is much closer in line to what my usual plain kombuchas taste like. Better carbonation, I would say.
keep saying pineapple funk, but it's like pineapple rubbed on old gym feet. Boy, I don't love that smell. The taste is closer, though. Still too acidic. We're going to have to keep going up. The richness I appreciate. The aftertaste tastes like beer. That smell in the front, it's a little off-putting. Let's jump up another 2. This one's 22 grams of simple syrup. Ooh. Mm. I'm not really sure where I stand because it's a little too acidic, a little too carbonated, and a little too sweet all at the same time. And just that smell is, it's not good and it's not beer. I think it's too acidic, but I think eventually we're going to run into a problem where it's got to be a little acidic because it's kombucha. But I don't think I would want it more acidic, so let's go up to our final bottle. This is 26 grams of simple syrup. Still pretty good carbonation, but less than last time. I could drink this. I feel like I'm not yet able to truly appreciate this, though, because there's a little tiny pellicle floating around inside the glass here, and I don't want to drink it. So I feel like most of my focus is on trying not to slurp that up. Is it a beer? No. It's not believable. It's not close. The hops isn't very hoppy. It's too acidic. And that weird smell, I don't care for at all. I've got a pretty bad cold, but even I can smell that. I don't think it's unsalvageable, though. I think I let it go too long in the first fermentation. If it wasn't so sour, I don't think it would be that bad. But I'm also not getting enough of the hops. So I think I would have wanted to bottle with another ½ gram of dry hops, just to let that come through a little cleaner. Because I think with a little less acidity, a little more of the bitterness from the hops, I think this would be a lot closer. And I would want to try another kit, I think, because I don't like this pineapple flavor, but I'm not sure where that might be coming from. Is it because of the yeast in our kombucha? Do they proliferate too much? Are they throwing off these weird off flavors? Is that the way that kombucha is going to ferment these grains? It's hard to say, but is it worth the trouble of trying to find out? Perhaps someday, but perhaps not someday soon. That smell is not great. It's quite unpleasant. I don't know if I'm going to be able to finish any of these bottles. Although I almost got through this one, so time will tell. So where does that leave things as far as fermenting grains? It's at least possible. There was no trouble with this. I think it was just a good lesson in going by taste in your primary fermentation and deciding when to call it, versus using a pH strip, which generally suck. I think I would need to try this a few more times. Oh, actually, we're not done, because I forgot I made one more beer. I had a little kombucha left over, so I filled this one with 13 grams of honey. Tastes the same. So while not delicious, it at least was not a failure. I mean, I guess it was in that I don't want to drink it really, but it at least shows that it's possible to ferment these grains in the primary fermentation and have them come out with a little bit of color, character, and flavor all their own. I think we can get this good, but I think it would take a lot of trials to get just right. Oh well, until next time, this is Reckless Booch. Ugh.